A millionaire pays a surrogate, but the baby's birth reveals a shocking secret. The hospital room buzzed with quiet anticipation. The soft hum of machines and the occasional shuffle of nurses were the only sounds interrupting the tense silence. Rebecca gripped the hospital bed's railings, her knuckles white with effort. Her breaths came in short, panicked bursts as another contraction gripped her body. "You're doing great, Rebecca," one of the nurses assured her, patting her shoulder gently. "It won't be long now." But Rebecca barely heard her. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, exhaustion, and something she couldn't quite name. She glanced to the corner of the room, where Marcus Sullivan stood, arms crossed, his perfectly tailored suit somehow out of place in the sterile hospital environment. His piercing blue eyes were fixed on her, but they lacked warmth. Instead, they were sharp, calculating. Rebecca shivered, her body trembling, not just from the labor pains but from the weight of the arrangement she had entered into 9 months ago. 9 months earlier, Rebecca had been at her wit's end. Her modest job as a librarian barely paid the bills, and with her younger brother's mounting medical expenses, she was desperate. That was when she saw the ad. Seeking surrogate, $500,000 for the perfect candidate. Discretion required. Rebecca had laughed at first, thinking it was some kind of scam. But as she read and reread the ad, her laughter turned to curiosity. The phone number led her to an elite fertility agency that catered to the wealthy and powerful. Within days, Rebecca found herself sitting in a lavish office, surrounded by marble floors and gleaming glass walls. That's where she met Marcus Sullivan for the first time. He was every inch the billionaire she had imagined, confident, poised, and intimidating. His black suit and crisp white shirt looked like they had been custom-made just for him. But there was something cold in his demeanor, something that made Rebecca uneasy even as he smiled at her. "I won't waste your time, Miss Harper," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I need a surrogate. Someone healthy, capable, and most importantly, discreet. You'll be compensated generously, of course." Rebecca's throat felt dry. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, but being in the same room as Marcus made her feel small, insignificant. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "There's no catch. The child will be mine and mine alone. You'll carry the baby, deliver it, and then walk away. Clean, simple, no complications." Rebecca hesitated. The money could change her life, save her brother's life. But the way Marcus spoke, like this was a business transaction and not the creation of a life, unnerved her. Still, desperation won out. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll do it." The next few months were a blur of medical appointments, legal paperwork, and constant monitoring. Marcus spared no expense, ensuring Rebecca had the best care possible. He provided her with a luxurious apartment, a private chef, and a monthly allowance. But he also made it clear that she was under his control. "I don't want any surprises," he had told her sternly. "Follow the plan, and we'll both get what we want." Rebecca nodded, biting back her resentment. She told herself it was only temporary. Once the baby was born, she could walk away with the money and never look back. But as the pregnancy progressed, Rebecca found herself growing attached to the life inside her. She would lie awake at night, her hands resting on her growing belly, whispering to the baby. "It's okay, little one," she would say softly. "I'm here. I'll protect you." She tried to remind herself that this wasn't her child, that she was just the vessel. But the baby's tiny kicks and flutters made it harder and harder to keep that emotional distance. Back in the hospital room, Rebecca's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp pain. She cried out, clutching the sheets as the nurse rushed to her side. "You're almost there, Rebecca," the nurse said encouragingly. "Just one more push." Rebecca squeezed her eyes shut, summoning every ounce of strength she had. A moment later, a piercing cry filled the room. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, lifting the squirming, wailing baby into the air. Rebecca's heart swelled as she caught a glimpse of the baby, his tiny fists waving, his face scrunched up in protest. For a fleeting moment, all the pain and fear melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love. But then she remembered. The baby wasn't hers. The nurse handed the newborn to Marcus, who had stepped forward with an unreadable expression. Rebecca watched as he held the baby awkwardly, his hands stiff and unsure. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes, a softness she hadn't seen before. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "Congratulations, Mr. Sullivan," the nurse said cheerfully. "He's perfect." Marcus nodded, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Thank you." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes as she turned away, trying to bury the ache in her chest. This was what she had signed up for. She had no right to feel this way. But just as the nurse began to clean up, another cry filled the room. A different cry. Rebecca froze, her eyes snapping open. The doctor and nurses exchanged confused glances. "What's going on?" Marcus demanded, his voice sharp. The doctor bent down, checking Rebecca's abdomen. His face went pale. There's another baby." Rebecca's heart stopped. "What?" The room erupted into chaos as the medical team sprang into action. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, his face a mask of disbelief. "Push, Rebecca," the doctor urged. "You're having twins." Rebecca was too stunned to respond, but her body took over, doing what it needed to do. Moments later, a second baby, a girl, entered the world. As the nurse handed the baby to Marcus, his face darkened. "This wasn't part of the plan," he said, his voice low. Rebecca's heart sank. She had never seen him like this, cold, detached, almost angry. "What do you mean?" she asked weakly. Marcus turned to her, his jaw tight. "There was only supposed to be one child, not two." Rebecca felt a surge of protectiveness as she looked at the baby girl, who was now lying in the bassinet beside her brother. She looked so small, so fragile, but her tiny cries were strong and defiant. "You can't just," Rebecca started, but Marcus cut her off. "I'll handle this," he said curtly, turning to leave the room with both babies. Rebecca's chest tightened with panic. "Wait, where are you taking them?" Marcus didn't answer. The door closed behind him, leaving Rebecca alone in the sterile hospital room, her mind racing with questions and fears. The shocking secret of the twins' birth had set off a chain reaction that Rebecca could never have anticipated. She knew Marcus had always been controlling, but his reaction to the unexpected second baby terrified her. What was he planning to do? And more importantly, how could she protect the children, both of them, from whatever he had in mind? As Rebecca lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, she made a silent vow. She wouldn't let Marcus dictate the fate of these babies. She had brought them into the world, and she would do whatever it took to ensure they were safe, even if it meant risking everything. Rebecca's mind raced as the door slammed shut behind Marcus. She had trusted him to honor their agreement, even if it had felt transactional. But now, as the realization of what just happened sank in, a deep unease settled over her. The presence of twins hadn't been planned, but how could he react so coldly to his own children? Rebecca couldn't shake the image of his face when he learned about the second baby, hard, calculating, as though the girl was a problem that needed solving. She sat up, ignoring the pain radiating through her body. She had just given birth, but her maternal instincts kicked in like a force she couldn't suppress. She needed answers, and she needed to see those babies. Swinging her legs over the side of the hospital bed, Rebecca stood shakily. Her body protested, but her resolve outweighed her physical discomfort. Outside the room, Marcus was speaking with one of the nurses, his voice low but commanding. Rebecca paused just around the corner, her heart pounding as she strained to listen. "This wasn't what we agreed on," Marcus said, his words clipped. "You assured me there was only one child." "Mr. Sullivan," the nurse replied carefully, "we couldn't have predicted this. Sometimes ultrasounds miss things and—" "I don't care about the explanations," Marcus interrupted. "I care about the solution. I only need one heir." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Only one heir? What did that mean for the baby girl? The nurse hesitated. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Sullivan?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his tone sent chills down Rebecca's spine. "Leave the girl with the surrogate. She can keep her. The boy is all I need." Rebecca couldn't listen any longer. She stepped into the hallway, her hands trembling with anger. "You can't do that," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Both Marcus and the nurse turned to her, startled. "Rebecca," Marcus said, recovering quickly. "You shouldn't be out of bed. And you shouldn't be deciding the fate of a newborn like she's some kind of disposable object," Rebecca shot back. Her voice cracked with emotion, but she held her ground. "You don't get to just leave her. She's your daughter." Marcus's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his imposing frame casting a shadow over her. "I paid you to carry this child. These children, as it turns out. The arrangement was clear. But I don't need to." Rebecca clenched her fists, her maternal instincts roaring to life. "You don't get to make that choice. They're both human beings, not pawns in some game." Marcus studied her for a moment, his piercing gaze narrowing. "I'll pay you extra to take the girl and disappear," he said finally. "Consider it a bonus." Rebecca felt a wave of nausea. "You think this is about money? These babies deserve a father who loves them, not someone who picks and chooses which one is useful." Marcus's expression hardened. "This is business, Rebecca. Don't make it personal." "But it is personal," Rebecca countered, her voice trembling with anger. "Maybe not to you, but it is to me. I carried them. I felt them grow. They're a part of me, whether you like it or not." For the first time, Marcus seemed to falter. His icy demeanor cracked ever so slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Rebecca thought she saw a glimmer of uncertainty in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I'll give you time to think about my offer," he said, his voice regaining its cold edge. "But I expect an answer by tomorrow." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Rebecca standing in the hallway, her heart racing and her mind spinning. That night, Rebecca lay awake in her hospital bed, her thoughts consumed by the twins. The boy and the girl, they were both so small, so innocent. How could Marcus be so indifferent? She thought about his words, his refusal to see them as anything more than tools in his carefully controlled life. It sickened her. But more than that, she thought about what she could do. She had no power, no resources. She was just a surrogate, bound by a contract that Marcus's team of lawyers had crafted. If she fought him, would she even stand a chance? She looked toward the small bassinets in the corner of the room where the twins lay sleeping. The nurse had brought them back after Marcus left, promising that they would remain together for the night. Rebecca felt an ache in her chest as she watched them, their tiny chests rising and falling with each breath. "I won't let him separate you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how, but I'll protect you. Both of you." The next morning, Rebecca was visited by one of Marcus's lawyers, a man named Charles. He was tall and impeccably dressed, with a polished professionalism that masked the sharpness of his intentions. "Miss Harper," he began, his tone neutral but firm. "Mr. Sullivan has authorized an additional payment for you, should you agree to take custody of the girl. It's a generous offer, more than enough to ensure her future." Rebecca felt her stomach churn. "And if I refuse?" Charles's expression didn't change. "I would advise against that. Mr. Sullivan has considerable influence, and it would be unwise to oppose him." Rebecca's hands clenched the hospital blanket. "She's his daughter." "She's an unexpected variable," Charles said flatly. "Mr. Sullivan's plans do not accommodate variables." Rebecca's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to tell Charles and Marcus that they were monsters. But she knew she needed to stay calm. If she lost her temper, she would lose any chance of protecting the twins. "I need time to think," she said finally, her voice shaking. Charles nodded. "Of course. But don't take too long. Mr. Sullivan values efficiency." As soon as Charles left, Rebecca called her best friend, Sarah. Sarah was the only person who knew about the surrogacy arrangement, and Rebecca trusted her more than anyone else in the world. "You need to get out of there," Sarah said immediately after Rebecca explained the situation. "Take the babies and run." Rebecca's chest tightened. "And go where?" "He'll find me, Sarah. He has money, lawyers, connections, everything I don't." Sarah hesitated, then said, "Come to my place. It's out of the city, and no one knows about it. At least it'll buy you some time." Rebecca bit her lip. The idea of running terrified her, but staying felt even more dangerous. She looked at the twins, their tiny faces so peaceful, so vulnerable. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." That night, Rebecca waited until the hospital was quiet. She packed a small bag with the essentials, a few clothes, diapers, bottles, and gently lifted the twins from their bassinets. They stirred but didn't wake, their small bodies warm against her chest. Her heart pounded as she slipped out of the room and made her way down the dimly lit hallway. Every step felt like a risk, every shadow a potential threat. But she couldn't stop now. When she reached the hospital's back exit, Sarah was waiting in her car. Rebecca slid into the passenger seat, clutching the twins tightly as Sarah sped away. "We'll figure this out," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "You're not alone, Rebecca. We'll keep them safe." Rebecca nodded, her eyes fixed on the sleeping babies in her arms. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. Rebecca sat in the dimly lit living room of Sarah's small house, rocking the twins gently as they slept. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest, but she couldn't allow herself to regret it. She had no choice. She had to protect these babies, especially the little girl Marcus had so coldly dismissed as an unexpected variable. Sarah returned from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, placing one on the coffee table in front of Rebecca. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." Rebecca nodded, though her stomach was in knots. "What happens next, Sarah? I can't stay here forever. Marcus will come looking for us." Sarah sat down beside her, her expression thoughtful. "We'll figure it out. I know a lawyer, a good one. He's not afraid to take on powerful people. Maybe he can help us." Rebecca hesitated. "What if Marcus claims custody? He has more resources than I could ever dream of. He'll fight for the boy at least. And he'll win." Sarah's jaw tightened. "He doesn't deserve them. Not after what he said, not after how he treated you. If we can prove that, maybe the courts will see it too." The next morning, Sarah's lawyer friend, Jonathan, arrived at the house. He was a kind-eyed man in his late 40s, with a calm demeanor that immediately put Rebecca at ease. As she recounted everything that had happened, Marcus's cold reaction to the twins, his plan to abandon the girl, his attempts to pay her off, Jonathan listened intently, taking notes. "This isn't going to be easy," he said when she finished. "But you have a strong case. If Marcus tries to take custody, we can argue that he's unfit, especially if we can prove he planned to abandon one of his children." Rebecca's heart sank. "What if he denies it?" "It's not like I have proof of what he said." Jonathan smiled faintly. "That's where things get interesting. Men like Marcus Sullivan always leave a trail. We'll dig into his past, his business dealings, his personal life. If there's anything that shows he's not the saint he pretends to be, we'll find it." Rebecca felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by fear. "And if you don't find anything?" Jonathan's expression softened. "Then we'll fight with what we have. You're the twins' biological mother, Rebecca. The courts will consider that. And your love for them will speak volumes." As Jonathan began his investigation, Rebecca focused on caring for the twins. She tried to create a sense of normalcy in Sarah's small but cozy home, even as the threat of Marcus loomed in the back of her mind. The twins, whom she had named Noah and Lily, became her world. Noah was curious and observant, his wide eyes constantly taking in his surroundings. Lily, on the other hand, was more vocal, her tiny cries demanding attention whenever she felt the slightest discomfort. "They're so different already," Rebecca mused one evening as she rocked Lily to sleep. "It's like they each have their own little personalities." Sarah smiled from the kitchen, where she was preparing bottles. "They're perfect," she said. "And they're lucky to have you." Rebecca's chest tightened with emotion. "I just want them to be safe. To have the life they deserve." A week later, Rebecca's fragile sense of security was shattered. As she returned from a walk with the twins, she noticed a sleek black car parked across the street from Sarah's house. Her heart raced as she quickened her pace, clutching the stroller's handle tightly. When she reached the door, Sarah was waiting, her face pale. "They know," she whispered. "Marcus's people found us." Rebecca's mind went blank with panic. "What do we do?" "We stick to the plan," Sarah said firmly. "Jonathan's on his way. He'll handle this." Minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Rebecca froze, her arms instinctively wrapping around the twins. Sarah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder before answering the door. It wasn't Marcus, it was Charles, the lawyer who had visited Rebecca in the hospital. His demeanor was calm but authoritative as he stepped inside, flanked by two men in suits. "Miss Harper," he began, his tone cool and professional. "You violated the terms of your agreement with Mr. Sullivan. He's prepared to take legal action if you don't return the boy to him immediately." Rebecca's voice shook as she replied, "He doesn't get to pick and choose which child he wants. They're both his. And I'm their mother." Charles's expression didn't waver. "Mr. Sullivan is willing to overlook this indiscretion if you comply. Otherwise, this will escalate." Before Rebecca could respond, Jonathan arrived, his presence immediately shifting the dynamic in the room. "She's not going anywhere," he said firmly, stepping between Rebecca and Charles. "If Marcus Sullivan wants to fight for custody, he can do it in court. But I warn you, we have plenty to say about his fitness as a parent." Charles raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly do you plan to say?" Jonathan smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Let's start with his plan to abandon one of his children. Or his attempts to bribe Rebecca into silence. Should I go on?" For the first time, Charles looked uneasy. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low. "Mr. Sullivan doesn't lose." Jonathan's smile widened. "There's a first time for everything." Over the next few weeks, the legal battle intensified. Marcus's team filed for custody of Noah, while Jonathan countered with a petition for full custody of both twins on Rebecca's behalf. The case attracted media attention, with headlines painting Marcus as either a heartless billionaire or a misunderstood father, depending on the outlet. Rebecca hated the spotlight, but she knew it was necessary. The public scrutiny put pressure on Marcus and his legal team, forcing them to tread carefully. Meanwhile, Jonathan worked tirelessly to gather evidence, uncovering details about Marcus's past that painted him in a less than flattering light. One particularly damning discovery was a series of emails between Marcus and his lawyer, outlining his plan to have Rebecca sign away her parental rights to the twins. The emails also revealed his intention to send Lily to a distant relative, ensuring she would never interfere with his plans for Noah. When the emails were presented in court, Marcus's composure cracked for the first time. Rebecca watched as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening as the judge read the messages aloud. "This is highly concerning," the judge said, his tone stern. "Mr. Sullivan, these children are not assets to be managed. They are human beings, and their well-being must come first." As the trial continued, Rebecca found herself facing Marcus in the courtroom for the first time since she had fled. He looked as confident and polished as ever, but there was an edge to his demeanor, a tension that hadn't been there before. When Rebecca took the stand, she spoke from the heart, describing her bond with the twins and her fears about Marcus's intentions. "I don't want to keep them from their father," she said, her voice trembling. "But I can't let him treat them like pawns in a game. They deserve love, stability, and a parent who sees them as more than just tools to further his legacy." Marcus's lawyer attempted to discredit her, questioning her motives and her ability to provide for the twins. But Rebecca held her ground, her love for Noah and Lily giving her the strength to face the scrutiny. In the end, the judge ruled in Rebecca's favor, granting her full custody of both twins. Marcus was given the option of supervised visitation, but to everyone's surprise, he declined. "I have no interest in playing a role in their lives," he said coldly, his words cutting through Rebecca like a knife. "Let her have them." Rebecca felt a mix of relief and heartbreak as Marcus walked out of the courtroom without so much as a backward glance. She had won, but at a cost she hadn't fully anticipated. Back at Sarah's house, Rebecca held the twins close, tears streaming down her face. They were safe now, and they were hers. But she couldn't help but mourn the loss of what could have been, a father who loved them, a family united. Sarah sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You did it," she said softly. "You fought for them, and you won." Rebecca nodded, her heart full of both sorrow and hope. "I just want them to be happy. To know they're loved." "They will," Sarah assured her. "Because they have you." The weeks following the court's decision were a whirlwind of emotions for Rebecca. While she was relieved to have full custody of Noah and Lily, the reality of raising 2 children on her own began to sink in. The financial strain, the sleepless nights, and the constant fear of Marcus changing his mind weighed heavily on her. But Rebecca was determined to give the twins the life they deserved. With Sarah's unwavering support, she began to rebuild her life. She found a modest apartment in a quieter part of town, far from the chaos of the city. It wasn't much, but it was a fresh start, a place where they could finally feel safe. Noah and Lily thrived under Rebecca's care. Though they were still infants, their personalities began to shine. Noah was curious and observant, often staring at Rebecca with wide, thoughtful eyes as if trying to understand the world around him. Lily, on the other hand, was lively and vocal, her giggles filling the small apartment with joy. Rebecca cherished every moment with them, even the difficult ones. She would rock them to sleep, sing to them softly, and whisper promises of a better future. "You're safe now," she would say, her voice full of love. "I'll never let anything happen to you." Meanwhile, Marcus seemed to disappear from their lives entirely. Rebecca had expected him to fight the court's decision or at least try to maintain some form of contact with the twins, but he didn't. It was as if he had erased them from his life. Rebecca should have been relieved, but the silence unsettled her. She couldn't help but wonder what he was planning. Was this truly the end, or was he biding his time? One evening, as Rebecca was putting the twins to bed, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jonathan. "We need to talk. Something's come up." Rebecca's heart sank. She called him immediately, her voice trembling. "What's going on?" Jonathan's tone was cautious. "It seems Marcus is facing some legal trouble unrelated to the custody case. There's an investigation into his business practices, fraud, embezzlement, that sort of thing. It's all over the news." Rebecca felt a mix of shock and vindication. "Does this mean he won't come after the twins?" "It's hard to say," Jonathan admitted. "If his empire crumbles, he might lose interest entirely. But people like Marcus don't like to lose." "Stay vigilant, Rebecca." The news about Marcus's downfall spread quickly. Once a powerful and untouchable billionaire, he now faced public scrutiny and legal battles that threatened to destroy everything he had built. Rebecca couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. For so long, he had used his wealth and influence to control others, but now the tables had turned. Still, she couldn't let her guard down. She focused on her children, pouring all her energy into creating a stable and loving environment for them. Noah and Lily continued to grow, their bond with Rebecca strengthening with each passing day. She found a part-time job at a local community center where she could bring the twins with her. The staff and other parents quickly fell in love with them, often commenting on how happy and well cared for they were. "You're doing an amazing job," one of the other mothers said to Rebecca one afternoon. "Those kids are lucky to have you." Rebecca smiled, though the weight of her responsibilities never left her. She didn't feel amazing. She felt like she was barely holding it together. But the twins' smiles made it all worth it. Months turned into years, and Rebecca slowly built a new life for herself and the twins. By the time Noah and Lily turned 4, they were thriving in every sense of the word. Noah loved building things, blocks, puzzles, anything that required focus and creativity. Lily, on the other hand, had a natural flair for storytelling, often weaving elaborate tales during playtime. Rebecca watched them with pride, marveling at how far they had come. But she also knew that the day would come when they would ask questions about their father. She had no idea how she would answer them. That day arrived sooner than she expected. One evening, as she was tucking the twins into bed, Noah looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy," he asked, "do we have a daddy?" Rebecca froze, her heart pounding. She glanced at Lily, who was staring at her expectantly. "Well," Rebecca began carefully, "you do have a father. But he's not in our lives." "Why not?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with sadness. Rebecca sighed, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "It's complicated," she said gently. "Your father made some choices that weren't right for us. But you have me, and I love you more than anything in the world." Noah nodded thoughtfully, but Lily frowned. "Maybe he'll change his mind and come back," she said. Rebecca forced a smile, though her heart ached. "Maybe," she said softly. But no matter what, you'll always have me. Despite Rebecca's attempts to shield them, the twins eventually learned about Marcus through the media. His legal troubles and the collapse of his empire were well documented, and it wasn't long before they connected the dots. At first, Rebecca was terrified of how they would react. But to her surprise, they didn't seem angry or upset. "He doesn't sound like a very nice person," Noah said one day as they watched a news segment about Marcus's downfall. Rebecca nodded, her heart heavy. "He's made a lot of mistakes," she said. "But that doesn't change the fact that he's your father." Lily shrugged. "We don't need him. We have you." Rebecca felt tears welling in her eyes. "And I'll always be here for you," she said, pulling them into a tight hug. As the years went on, Rebecca continued to focus on building a bright future for Noah and Lily. She returned to school, earning a degree in social work so she could help other families in need. Her work at the community center became a full-time career, and she found a sense of purpose in supporting others. Noah and Lily grew into kind, intelligent, and compassionate young people. They excelled in school, made friends easily, and often volunteered with Rebecca at the community center. Though their lives were far from easy, they were happy. And for Rebecca, that was all that mattered. One day, as she watched Noah and Lily play in the park, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The shadows of the past no longer loomed over them. They had found their place in the world, and they were thriving. Rebecca knew there would always be challenges, but she also knew that they could face anything together. After all, they were a family, a real family, and no one could ever take that away from them. Years later, Rebecca found herself standing in the doorway of Noah and Lily's room, watching them work on a project together. At 13, the twins were more inseparable than ever, their bond unshakable. Noah, with his quiet intellect and methodical approach, was sketching plans for a science project, while Lily, ever the creative spirit, was cutting out colorful designs for their presentation board. "Are you sure this will work?" Lily asked, tilting her head as she studied Noah's sketches. "It will," Noah replied confidently. "But only if you stop adding glitter to everything." Lily grinned, sprinkling another handful of glitter onto the poster board. "Glitter makes everything better." Rebecca laughed softly, her heart swelling with pride. Despite everything they had been through, her children were thriving. They were smart, kind, and full of potential. She often marveled at how far they had come since those early, uncertain days. But there was one thing Rebecca couldn't ignore: the growing curiosity in Noah and Lily about their father. As they grew older, they asked more questions, their innocent inquiries becoming more pointed. Rebecca had always been honest with them, but she had kept the darker details of Marcus's behavior to herself. That all changed one crisp autumn evening when the twins came home from school with a newspaper article. "Mom," Lily said, holding out the paper, her expression serious. "Is this about him?" Rebecca's stomach twisted as she took the article. The headline read, "Former billionaire Marcus Sullivan launches charity initiative amid scandal recovery." The accompanying photo showed Marcus standing in front of a new community center, a forced smile on his face. Rebecca set the paper down, her hands trembling. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "It was in the library," Noah said quietly. "We recognized his name." Lily crossed her arms. "Why didn't you tell us he's back in the news? He's trying to act like a hero now." Rebecca sighed, sinking into a chair. "Because I didn't think it mattered. Marcus made his choice years ago. He hasn't been a part of our lives, and I didn't want to stir up old wounds. But he's still our father," Noah said, his voice steady but firm. "Don't we deserve to know the truth?" Rebecca looked at her children, her heart aching. They were no longer little kids she could shield from the harsh realities of the world. They deserved answers. Later that night, Rebecca sat down with Noah and Lily in the living room. She had prepared herself for this conversation for years, but now that it was here, she felt unprepared. "Your father," she began slowly, "is a complicated man. He's done things I don't agree with, and he's hurt people, including us. But he's also human, and people can change." Lily frowned. "Do you think he's changed? Or is this charity thing just for show?" Rebecca hesitated. "I don't know, Lily. Maybe he's trying to make up for his past mistakes. Or maybe he's just protecting his image. Either way, It doesn't change what he did to us. Noah leaned forward, his eyes searching Rebecca's face. Would you ever let him back into our lives? Rebecca's chest tightened. That's not my decision to make, she said softly. You're old enough to decide for yourselves. If you want to reach out to him, I won't stop you. But I want you to think carefully about what that means. Marcus isn't like us. He sees the world differently, and that might not be easy to understand. The twins spent the next few days processing what Rebecca had told them. Lily, ever the bold one, was eager to confront Marcus and demand answers. Noah, however, was more cautious. He wanted to know more about Marcus before making any decisions. I found some articles about him online, Noah told Rebecca one evening. It looks like he's trying to rebuild his reputation. But there's a lot of criticism too. Some people think he's only doing it for attention. Rebecca nodded. That sounds like him. Marcus has always cared about appearances. Lily joined them, her phone in hand. I found an interview he did last week, she said. He talked about wanting to reconnect with his past. Do you think that means us? Rebecca's heart ached at the hope in Lily's voice. I don't know, she admitted. But if you want to find out, I'll support you. A week later, Noah and Lily made their decision. They wanted to meet Marcus. Rebecca arranged the meeting through Jonathan, who had remained a trusted friend over the years. Marcus agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. Rebecca insisted on being there, though she promised to give the twins space to talk. When the day arrived, Rebecca's nerves were on edge. She sat at a table near the back of the cafe, watching as Marcus entered. He looked older, his once sharp features softened by time and stress. But his presence was as commanding as ever. Noah and Lily sat across from him, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Marcus studied them for a moment before speaking. You've grown so much, he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I almost didn't recognize you. Lily was the first to respond. Why did you leave us? Marcus flinched, but he quickly composed himself. I thought it was the best thing for all of us, he said. At the time, I wasn't ready to be a father. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I thought you'd be better off without me. Noah frowned. And now? Why are you trying to come back into our lives? Marcus sighed, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. Because I realize now that I was wrong. I can't change the past, but I want to try to make things right. If you'll let me. The conversation was tense and emotional, but by the end of it, Noah and Lily seemed to feel some sense of closure. They weren't ready to forgive Marcus entirely, but they were open to the possibility of building a relationship on their terms. Rebecca watched from a distance, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She still didn't trust Marcus, but she couldn't deny the importance of this moment for her children. As they left the cafe, Marcus approached Rebecca. Thank you, he said quietly, for raising them, for giving them what I couldn't. Rebecca met his gaze, her voice firm. Don't thank me. Thank them for giving you a second chance. Don't waste it. Marcus nodded, a flicker of regret in his eyes. I won't. In the months that followed, Marcus began to play a small role in Noah and Lily's lives. He attended their school events, sent thoughtful gifts, and made an effort to get to know them. Rebecca remained wary, but she allowed him the opportunity to prove himself. Noah and Lily, for their part, approached the situation with caution. They set boundaries and made it clear that trust would have to be earned. And slowly, over time, Marcus began to change. He became less focused on appearances and more invested in genuine connections. For the first time, Rebecca saw glimpses of the man he could have been, the man she hoped he was becoming. Years later, as Noah and Lily graduated from college, Marcus stood beside Rebecca, tears in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. Rebecca smiled, her heart full. It wasn't easy, she admitted. But it was worth it. They're worth it. And as the twins accepted their diplomas, Rebecca knew that their story wasn't one of brokenness or loss. It was a story of resilience, love, and the power of second chances.